this is my second attempt for the day for a video reflection example. As many of you noted in your emails to me this evening, the first one that I uploaded wasn't a complete example. It was only a few seconds long. So for whatever reason, it didn't record in its entirety. So, okay, this happens. As I said before, I'm new to this too. So I'm doing this for the first time, as are all of you. So it's a learning process. I'm still getting to know the software on how to do this, and you likely are also experimenting. So these things happen. Thank you for your patience and understanding. And as I said before, I committed to giving you an example of sort of what I'm looking for. So here it is. The first one was a lot more polished. I'm trying to speak quietly because it's really late at night now, and I'm also in my pajamas, but that's okay because, as I said to some of you individually, there's no formal framework and you don't have to worry about formalities per se. The point of this is to practice extracting a key idea from the literature and exploring it through your own thoughts and articulating it clearly in a coherent sort of manner. And I think some of you, if you have practiced or tried to complete your video reflections, you'll notice that it's more difficult than you think to come up with an idea and express it clearly and coherently. So hopefully we all manage to do this. I think that it's a neat learning process. So let's give this a try. So what I wanted to talk about was, I guess, the usefulness of post-colonial theory as a framework in contemporary research. So we talked about in the lecture how post-colonialism studies is a reaction to colonialism. But I think what sometimes gets sort of foggy in discussions about this is that when we say it's a reaction to colonialism, what we are essentially saying in relation to post-colonial theory is that it's a reaction to the products or the output of colonialism in terms of knowledge creation. So when we talk about colonialism, yes, it was a physical act, but the legacy of it, or the results and the repercussions of it, is the knowledge and the understandings and the beliefs and assumptions that came from this, came from the uneven power imbalance of who's creating knowledge, how that knowledge is disseminated. So as I said in the lecture, of course, the victors create history, and it's the same with colonialism. Much of what we know, as we talked about, stems from a lot of colonial understandings or frameworks that we're still working with. So I agree with that post-colonialism theory is a reaction to the output of knowledge of colonialism. But what I think Said and other post-colonial scholars don't recognize is that at the same time that post-colonialism is a reaction, it is also guilty of what it claims to be criticizing. And that's essentially the mystification and essentialism, primarily the essentialism of colonialism. And I'm not sure if it's fair to criticize Said and the early post-colonial theorists directly, because at that point in time, the ideas that they were expressing had not yet developed, had not yet snowballed into these sort of essentialist ideas that they are today. But today, I wonder what Said would think of how Orientalism, for instance, as a concept, is being taught and discussed in classrooms everywhere. Because, I mean, the let's say the essence or the core of post-colonial claims is that it's a commentary on the manifestations of power imbalances, right? This unevenness But at the heart of it, at the root of it, is this individualist resistance. So it's about an individual reclaiming of culture and identity and resistance to this sort of false or incorrect or inaccurate narrative that has been produced for people, right? But how I see post-colonialism and post-colonial theory being used today is so far removed from these original objectives and ideals. How is Orientalism, if we take it as a concept, how is that ever being applied to individual resistance today? It's not. I would argue that it's now an essentialist concept that is being applied en masse, sort of a crude, overarching framework. So in that sense, post-colonialism and Orientalism, as an example of it, is really devoid of its original objectives and its essence. So I think with this realization, we can argue, perhaps, as Darcy does, that post-colonialism, the original objectives of post-colonialism theory, have been washed away. They no longer exist. They're no longer being produced and reproduced. If we think of post-colonialism as being a reaction on an individual level, individualist resistance. So I'm not sure that this is the ideas behind Darcy's claim that there's an end of post-colonialism and post-colonialist theory. But I think that what his text is highlighting is the lack of relevance today of this framework, of this tool, in terms of being able to explain, as it once did, the power dynamics and the unevenness, right? So we see, and I think in relation to that, he's also pointing out a sort of redundancy of the term. So you can say it's sort of an essentialism, or the redundancy, that it loses meaning and that it's removed from its original context and it's being sort of mass produced and reproduced. So in that sense, can we use post-colonialism with any sort of value to explain or to help us understand contemporary events and contemporary issues? The way that I see it, post-colonialism theory today is a bit too crude or clumsy, if you will, to actually be a useful tool for highlighting these obvious dynamics. So in that sense, I'm not sure if I would say that any particular event marks the end of post-colonialism, but I would say that post-colonialism today is no longer useful as it once was. So can I relate that to a particular event like the Arab Spring? Okay, so in that sense, that's how I read, or that's one interpretation of how I read Darcy. He links it, of course, specifically to this particular event, but what I recognize in his commentary is sort of the weakness or the manifestations of post-colonial theory in contemporary research today. So that marks the end of my, I think it was quite a bit longer than 2 minutes. But I think you guys will see when you're creating your own that 2 to 5 minutes becomes easier and easier to do. So 2 minutes might seem like a long time, but you're talking in your own environment and you're saying things that feel good and sound good, and so you're just going to go with it. And that's what I really want to encourage. So don't feel like you need to stick strictly within these frameworks, but I do ask for a minimum of 2 minutes. So I hope this serves as a viable example. I have to say that it was pretty dry in terms of creativity, but hopefully, as a first attempt, everyone can at least manage this. And as we go along with 3, people can get more creative in terms of how they express themselves, and also more comfortable. So bringing in anecdotes, bringing in personal stories, bringing in contemporary events into their analysis, that is all fantastic. And I really look forward to seeing each of your video reflections. So thank you for your patience in waiting for me to actually deliver this long-awaited video reflection. And if you have questions or comments, of course, come talk to me or email me. So Good night.